and welcome to Colin's Wonder. I hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, we have another entry into Ink Wars. This will be Ink Wars Purple. So I will be going over and comparing Ink Wars as outlined in my Ink Wars intro video. I will be comparing three inks. So the first ink is Lamy Dark Lilac. The second ink is Herbin Amethyste. And the third ink is a Ferris Press Aurorealis. So I did go through and went through and did my little tests on these inks with the different paper samples. So we can look at those. So some notes. Again, I ran into issues with the Midori paper kind of disintegrating. So the first ink I tested was Lamy Dark Lilac. So let me give you a little bit of a closer look at that. It sheens it sheens a lot. So, but if you notice, it doesn't really look all that purple. So this ink is supposed to be purple. It kind of looks purple when you're first put it on the paper, but when that sheen starts to happen, it doesn't look purple anymore. It looks brown to me, but not necessarily a good looking brown. It's not necessarily bad either. Okay. And then the next up was Aurorealis. That was the last one. Sorry. Next up was Amethyste by Herbin. So if you look at that ink closer up. And the last up we had Aurorealis by Ferris Press. So this one got smudged a little bit because I set it aside and accidentally put another piece of paper over it. Actually, I put this piece of paper over it while this one was drying. All right, so now we can get three of them side by side. For you to compare. So this one's a sheening ink, and these two are shimmer inks. The Amethyst has a little bit of a silver shimmer, and then the Aurorealis has gold shimmer to it. I don't know if you can see it here or not, but I can see it. And then let's go ahead and look at the torture test side. Side by side. Right. So let's kind of go through these scorecards a little bit. First up, we have Lamy Dark Lilac. Now, this ink actually, I feel like it feels and it writes very well. It did very well in the performance when it comes to blotching, drying, flow, and feel. It performed really well. I wouldn't say you know, the torture test side, it did all right too. I did have a little bit of skipping on the receipt paper when I was writing. So you can see here, it, you know, you can kind of fill it. And that's why I have receipt paper on here, because sometimes with some inks and some pens, it doesn't write as well. It didn't do horrible. It just, you can see the skipping there. So what else? It didn't really bleed that badly. Not like my inks from last week. There's a little bit. The feathering on the moleskin. You know, actually, let's look at them all side by side so you can see the moleskin specifically. That's what that's for, is the feathering. So if I were to look here, you know, it almost looks like it did the best when it comes to feathering. What's interesting about it is the feathering with the Aurorealis, you know, looks the worst. But honestly, you know, when I look close at this J.R. Bond ink, you know, on the camera, I can see the feathering. But it kind of looks interesting and good from far away. When I'm just looking at it, it almost makes it, you know, I actually don't mind it at all. So, but as far as like raw performance goes, I would say that the dark lilac was the better. So I think, you know, they actually tied on the scorecard, which I don't mind, because as I said, from far away, I actually liked how that one looked. But maybe you could say that the dark lilac wins there. So let's see, that's what I have for the torture score. And then the appearance, you know, the color scores, how well does I think it represent purple or lilac? And I gave it a 0 because after the ink's dried, I can't see any purple. I just can't. So that's sad to me. Doesn't matter what paper I seem to put it on, I just can't see any purple. As far as looks go, with the color that does dry as, and how well does I think it looks, you know, I don't think it's that pretty of a color. I think I was being a little generous, honestly, giving it a 19. Because, you know, as far as browns go, or whatever color this is, I feel like there's a lot of colors that are better. So I think I was being a little generous there, but I felt so bad giving it a 0 on color. I was a little generous. And, you know, I actually gave it some bonus too on the features. Just because I think it sheens really well. So I kind of want to adjust that though, because, you know, I'm going to. So I gave it a 5, but on my other scorecards, I didn't score them as high. I actually think the sheen is part of the problem with the ink. So I'm going to, you know, I don't know if this sheen is a feature for this ink. So I'm going to give it a 1. So that means this score goes from what it was before, 81.2. So that's going to be 77.2. So yeah, I adjust that. I feel that's fair, because I think the sheening actually is part of the problem with this ink. Okay, next up we have Amethyste by J.R. Bond. And this one, in my opinion, feels the best to write with on all papers. Doesn't feel dry, doesn't feel, you know, too wet. I just feel like it feels the best. And these pens and other pens I've used. Let's see. Let's look at the writing sample and go through this. As I said, it does have some feathering on the moleskin, but I actually, on camera, I think it looks worse than in real life. I don't know. Maybe it should be adjusted on the score a little bit. If I were to redo this, I'd probably grade the feathering a little bit lower. But all the other writing samples look pretty good. So you can see, this is not bleeding. That's from smudging. There was a little bit of bleeding just on the printer paper part and on the moleskin part. So it did get docked there pretty, not heavily, but it's some minus some points there. And yeah, overall, I do like this ink. I think I'm not the biggest fan of shimmer inks, and I like how this one tones down the shimmer a little bit. Interestingly enough, the one I see the most shimmer on might be the moleskin, which is interesting to me. I mean, I'm not counting the dip pen part. So, yeah. I see it most in the moleskin. That's very fascinating, but it just has a little subtle shimmer here and there, which I like about it. So back to the scorecard. On the appearance, I think, it's not like the perfect purple. So I gave it a 9. I do think it's as far as purples goes, it's quite high up there as far as representing the color. And I actually think this color looks pretty good, so I gave it a 26. And I think as far as shimmer goes, I personally like the subtlety of the shimmer because I'm not big into shimmer, but I gave it a 2 just because I've seen more shimmery inks out there, like Gold Lapis and those where I just can't see anything but the shimmer. So, I think 2 points is good there. If you personally feel like it deserves more, that's fine. You can boost it. I'm not offended in any way. This is all subjective. So next up we have Aurorealis by Ferris Press. So I ran into issues on this one with the Midori paper just kind of disintegrating, and that might just be the nibs a little more scratchy on the pen I used, and the Midori paper just tends to disintegrate like newspaper getting wet. It just doesn't feel as good. So on this one, some notes. This one, as far as the drying, I think this one was a little slower to dry than the others, thus all the smudging. But it also feels a little drier. So when I'm writing with it, it just feels a little bit drier than those other two. The one that felt the wettest was the dark lilac, and then the amethyst I think feels just right. This one just is a little on the drier side. The feathering, I think it did the worst in the feathering. The bleeding, it had a little bit of bleeding on the printer side and the moleskin. And then skipping, it did have a little bit of a skipping issue on the receipt paper. Not too bad, not as bad as the dark lilac had. I gave it actually the same score for color and looks. This Aurorealis, when it dries, to me it looks very comparable to the amethyst. I think the amethyst is slightly more It's a little lighter and a little more purple, but they look very comparable to me. And I like them about the same. And the only difference really, I mean, there's differences, obvious difference in the color here. I mean, you can see it, but I feel like to me they're about the same as far as like the score goes. But the difference I was trying to highlight is this one has a shimmer that's silver. This one has a shimmer that's gold. And I personally actually think the gold and the purple look a little bit better. So I gave it a 3. And I also think it actually had a little bit more gold and is a little bit more noticeable to me. So that gave it a score of 93. So if we just look at scores, we got a 77.2 in last place, then a 93 for Aurorealis, and then 94.7 for Herbin. So yeah, that's about it, I guess. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.